A few years ago, I am hiking in the mountains totally alone. And I passed by this tiny stream, crystal clear water flowing over the rocks. But I keep walking. And then, about an hour later, the heat kicks in. It's extremely hot, and I am tired, sunburnt, and also very, very thirsty. And now, the same stream of water, the one I had ignored before, became everything in the story. Now it was like, I need water. And nothing had changed in the stream itself, if you really think about it. What changed was me. Desire shifted my perception. The thirst I was feeling made me see reality in a complete different manner, and now the water became something extremely, extremely important, especially because I completely forgot that my water bottle was without water. And that's the idea I want to explore today, that desire isn't just something that we feel, but it is something that shapes how the world appears to us. It determines what we notice, what matters, what stands out, and what fades into the background. Welcome to the Philosophy in Real Life podcast, where we strive to live meaningful lives by pursuing truth and unmasking the lies in our culture. I'm your host, Carlos Santos, a philosophy PhD from Spain. Welcome to Season 2, The Ethics of Desire. Welcome back, everybody. Episode 1, finally. So, what is desire? That's the big question we're asking today. And the big idea I want to present today is that desire, let me give you a definition, okay? Desire is the human experience of being drawn towards something we perceive as valuable. Let me repeat. Desire is the human experience of being drawn towards something that we perceive as valuable. So generally speaking, we desire something we lack or that we cannot give to ourselves. The way we typically speak of desires is when we talk about the goals that we have or the objectives for the 2026, whatever, or something that we want to achieve in the next month or quarter. Also, we speak of desires when we speak of the long-term plans that we are working towards, these goals, objectives, or plans that we have. All of these things basically involve things we desire for a number of reasons. But if we were to classify different kinds of desires, we could distinguish a couple intuitively. We can think of the desires that are based on a biological need or urge or craving. In the example above that I gave you, I became thirsty, then I desire water. When we are not thirsty, we do not even pay attention to water. We don't care. But when we become thirsty, when we are thirsty, all our attention is fixated on finding some liquid to drink. I have a guilty pleasure. I'm not saying you should follow the example here. When I become extremely thirsty and I'm dehydrated, the problem is that I do not want water. The problem is that I want Diet Coke. And so you can see that even when we are in extremely vulnerable states, such as being very hungry or very thirsty, we want the highest amount of pleasure possible, basically. And so that is also tied to the second kind of desire, if we could speak of this desire in those terms. We desire things that are pleasurable. We can think of high-fat, high-sugar foods that are very palatable. And that is why it's really hard to eat these kinds of foods in moderation. I was talking to a researcher and a sister of the church, and we were discussing intuitive eating, which is one of the practices that is just listening to your body and doing intuitive eating. And I said, the problem with intuitive eating, I said to her, is that none of the things that we crave the most is something that we find in nature. We don't overeat bananas or watermelons or things like that. I mean, people do not get sick overweight based on eating fruit. It's mostly cookies and dessert and high fat foods and things like that. So, and I said, it's very hard to calibrate or recalibrate our taste buds or our intuition when eating, when the food we are exposed to or that we are eating is something completely engineered to make you not obey this intuition, basically. And so that's an issue. But beyond these desires that are either based on biological needs or also very pleasurable, we can think of the desires that actually go beyond the biological needs. For example, we desire recognition or are fulfilling life beyond having our physical needs met. You can think of love or friendship, communion with others, or in the language of Greek philosophers, truth, beauty, and the good. That sounds better, right? We also desire things that are useful, like the utility of things. I remember I went to Cadiz, which I bought this t-shirt, Cadiz Vibes here, is in Andalusia in the south. And I remember that the first thing I was paying attention to was the children park, because my son wakes up with a lot of energy and it can be very difficult to entertain him and play with him in the house. So I was just exploring the area, trying to find the nearest children park for me to take my son to play the next morning. And so as you can see, now that I'm a parent, you start paying attention to things that before I became a parent, I did not care, or that it's not so much that I didn't care, because I'm glad that other parents who had children, they had these spaces to play with them. But it became extremely important and useful for me. Okay. So, and the same applies to anything that we start needing in order to do something, right? Just where do I go? Where can I find this tool or this paper or whatever you are looking for that you need in order to do something? So basically, this is the big idea. Desire is the human experience of being drawn towards something we perceive as valuable. Okay. And there are two main implications that follow from this definition, and they have to do with the place of desire in our human experience. Implication number one, let's speak about it. Now, the implication number one, it will sound weird at the beginning, but please keep tracking, okay, with me. It motivates our action. It makes us act out in the world. That's implication number one. Very important, okay? The point here is that desire, understood as a human experience of being drawn towards something we perceive as valuable, is a defining characteristic of our human condition. It is a feature of being a human. It is inescapable. And this is the interesting part. We are not self-sufficient by definition. That's why we desire. Desire is what makes us look beyond ourselves, right? So I cannot hydrate myself with my own body. I'm not self-sufficient. So I have to stand up and go explore the area in order to find water because I'm thirsty. I desire companionship or a relationship. So I have to do something in order to make friends. Why? Because we have these longings, we have these desires, we have these urges, we have these things inside of us that make you act out in the world, that motivate your action. I need to do something with this, because not fulfilling those desires, depending on which one we're talking about, might leave you miserable or just very unhappy and disappointed with life. And that is why I was saying that implication number one of having desires is that desires is fundamentally what motivates our action. It makes us act out in the world. Okay. If we were self-sufficient, we would not do anything really, like meaning you don't have to find water because you can provide yourself hydration, or same thing with hunger. You are hungry, you then look for food. But if you were never hungry, you would not do that. And so that's why I'm saying desiring something is what makes you look beyond yourself. Very important. Now, let's move on to the implication number two. Implication number two. Desire is so essential in our human activity that it structures the way we access reality in our attention. I repeat, this is very hard and complicated to explain, but it's fundamental. It's very important to understand this. Desire is so essential in our human activity that it structures the way we access reality in our attention. Now, we do not experience things in the world as independent facts detached from our activity. Instead, due to the structure of our perception, the world is revealed to us in light of our goals or desires. Now, this is very abstract. Let me give you an example. So, what I'm trying to say here is that things in the world appear to us either as facilitators or obstacles, depending on what we are trying to achieve. Let me give you an example. Imagine that I perceive a bridge in my environment, a bridge just to cross from one place to another. That's what bridges do, I think, for the most part. So imagine that I perceive a bridge in my environment. If my goal is to cross to the other side for any reason, then the bridge appears to me as a facilitator. But if there is an enemy force, an enemy tribe waiting to capture me on the other side, then that same bridge, which before was something positive, now becomes an obstacle, even a threat. This is really important. So see, we have the same physical element, the bridge, but depending on my goal, the bridge becomes either a facilitator or an obstacle, a threat. Now, this does not just happen with physical objects in space. It also occurs, for example, in our interactions with others. I'll give you an example in the workplace. So if I have just started a new job and I want to make friends, then any interruption or conversation will be a facilitator toward that goal. But let's say that now my goal is to finish a difficult task before the end of the workday. Then that same interaction becomes an obstacle because it's like, bro, please do not distract me. I'm trying to finish this project. That's how internally we might feel, right? But again, if we are new at the job, we want to socialize, make new friends, and so we will see any interruption as a facilitator for friendship. We can also see this exact issue with our physiological states. Feeling awake and energized is something positive, meaning it's a facilitator if I want to study all day, for example. But the same alertness, the same level of energy becomes a problem or an obstacle if my goal is to fall asleep early. The story of my life, man. Yes, so I love caffeine. I love feeling super awake. But if I have a coffee after lunch, most likely I will have a big problem falling asleep. But in my case, it's usually remaining asleep because then I wake up at 3, 4 a.m. and I just want to cure cancer. I just want to, let's get it. Let's go. But that's not, of course, that's an obstacle because then I feel miserable the following morning because I have not slept much, maybe 3, 4 hours. And on top of that, if my son wakes me up after I try to sleep, then it's even worse, right? So that's what I'm trying to say. The same physiological state or level of alertness and energy can become a facilitator or an obstacle depending on the context of our desires. If I want to work and I want to be awake, then great. Oh, I love this. But if I want to sleep, the same alertness, the same state becomes a big issue, an obstacle. Now, this is why we said before that desire is not just something we feel, but it's something that shapes how the world appears to us. The physical elements, the physical realities of our bodies and of our environment, they always reveal themselves either as facilitators or as obstacles. I hope this idea is quite clear. Another way of putting this in more philosophical language is to say that the world reveals itself as a place of value according to what we perceive as important, according to our desires, because we already said that what we desire is pointing to that which is valuable to us. And yes, we can speak of different definitions of like kinds of values, like moral value, survival value, whatever, but it's still valuable. For the discussion in our podcast, when we refer to the word values, we're going to just move away from the strict philosophical technical term or definition of what value is, because it's just complicated, and we're just gonna use it as a synonym of just something valuable, important, or desirable. And that could be something based on our bodies, or that could be based on a quality that we admire in somebody else, a feature of the good life that we want, such as recognition or like respect or like love, friendship, depends, right? So different people find different things valuable, but we'll see, because that is not exactly right. But for now, that's good enough. Now, a major discussion in philosophy, attention here, because this is kind of like the main issue that we're going to be analyzing. A major discussion in philosophy is whether these values that we perceive are objective or subjective. And here's where the tension begins, because attention here, if desires come from me and from you, and if they sometimes, or often, contradict each other because we have competing desires, right? We want to be fit, but we want the pizza. We want to stay committed and the loyalty and all of that type of relationship, but we also want novelty and variety in relationships. So as you can see, if you analyze your desires, you will realize that they are in constant conflict. Okay. Now, if desires come from me and from you, and if these desires sometimes or often contradict each other, how can we say that they are objective? How can they be objective if they vary so much and they are so different from person to person, and not only from person to person, but even within each person, they are different. They have too many desires. Now, because of this felt dilemma, many people explicitly or implicitly subscribe to what is called in philosophy moral relativism. Moral relativism is the idea, simply put, that I have my truth and you have yours. And as long as you respect my truth, we get along. And of course, oh man, there's too many things wrong already with that statement, okay? But we're not gonna go deep into it yet, because before we can answer whether values are objective or not, we have to ask something even more fundamental. Why do we question our desires in the first place? Part of the reason has to do because deep down we know that not all desires are created equal. We all have the experience of following one of our strongest desires. And after following that desire, the outcome, the aftermath of either engaging in it, giving into it, was just misery, distraction, and just a fragmented self. And we notice even in our bodies that after following those dark desires, we became worse people. Now, what we will explore next time in the next episode is, where does that judgment come from? Like, meaning, according to what criteria? Like, we need something above these competing desires in order to judge what is appropriate and what is not. And so what's up with that? Where did that come from? And as you can see, we are doing philosophy, so we are not taking anything for granted. We're looking at human experience, and we're trying to do a thorough analysis of the phenomenon of morality and desire in our human experience. So this, in academia, this is called moral phenomenology, or doing a phenomenological analysis of desire. And that is where we are headed next, everybody. So see you in the next episode.